I have some comments about
Hmm.
general comments about like Islamic kind of dawah, like what you guys do, and I think it's my claim. I have some claims. Like maybe we can start with the issue of the Quran memorization being kind of an indicator of its truth. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. But I'll highlight something which is very important, which is allowing discourse and at the same time being respectful. Because when someone hides their identity, they become a keyboard warrior. Are you aware of keyboard warriors?
Uh, well, I mean, if I like,
Not
I'm
you. Not, I'm not referring to you. I'm telling you what most people would do. When people
well,
believe that they are anonymous, a lot of them they just say things for the sake of saying it because they're anonymous. I don't believe you're going to do that. So I'm going to trust that you are going to be respectful and we're going to have a nice conversation. Yes. So what can I help you with? You said you had questions. What is the first question
well,
that
it's
you
first
said about the Quran? You said, go ahead. Yes.
right. So you say okay. You say because no other religion has, like for example, at least you compare with Christianity. You say that no one has memorized the Bible nowadays in full. And I'm saying, is it possible that like have you heard of savants before? Someone who like they're usually autistic, severely autistic, and they have like really good memories, and they can memorize exact dates and these things from years ago and tell you. So what is it if someone like that you teach them the Bible, right, and they memorize it? Does that mean that it's automatically true, or what if we have groups of them that we do that with? By the way, so I don't think it's really I think the argument's more like sophisticated than that. You're saying because of how many people can do it and how easily. Is that the claim? Or
It's not about the one person as you yourself. You already I kind of you answer your question kind of in a way. So you pose the question, then answer it. So the thing is, if you get a person
can
who
you what do you think?
has a level of autism and is able, for example, I believe your internet, by the way, is a bit delayed. So allow because sometimes you might think I'm done speaking, but I'm not because I think you thought that I was. So be careful with that. I think your internet is a little bit choppy. So I was saying,
Okay.
if someone is just has a level of autism and therefore he's able, I don't think even that level of autism, if it makes you good with numbers, does not necessarily mean that it will give you a good memory. I'm not familiar with that, but hypothetically assuming that there are people who will be able, therefore now, not numbers, but they're able, therefore, to memorize one person who's able or two people who are able to memorize the full Bible from beginning to end. That is not a testimony to the preservation because it is a small number, as you said. The reason the Quran is the oral tradition of the Quran is a testimony of its preservation is due to the fact that every Muslim at least memorizes part of the Quran. There's not a Muslim who doesn't memorize part of the Quran unless he just accepted Islam yesterday or something. It's a different story. If you're a Muslim and you do your 5 daily prayers, etc., you memorize a part of the Quran because
Well,
you
that
need to memorize to recite in the prayer. Now, not only that, we're saying there are millions of people who fully memorize the book from beginning to end, and there is a living tradition of that happening. It's not just one or two people are doing it, hypothetically doing it, in which they can then corroborate with each other to change. But when you have, as we say, millions of people memorizing, you cannot corroborate millions of people together in order for you to change the scripture. So that's not the same idea. So for example, the Bible has changed throughout history due to the fact, not just that there is no one memorizing it, but the fact that it was in the early days, it was only the elites and the scribes who had access to the language. People were not learning the language Latin, they were not reading it, they were not having access to the scripture. They had to go to the churches. Therefore, it was easy for scribes to change as well if they wanted to change. So that was a complete different system other than the Islamic system, where everyone had access to the scripture. Not only that, but memorizing it, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and then millions of people memorizing the Quran until today. So that is the reason. That is the argument that I was making, basically.
and you don't say that it's conclusive for the truth of it. Doesn't give you the truth of Islam. You're saying it just it makes it more likely that it just means it's preservation. It indicates preservation. That's the only claim, right?
Yeah, well, his question was why Islam, and then I give multiple reasons. And one of them is preservation, because a religion cannot be, scripture cannot be said to be from God if it's not preserved. Because then people will add their own words. So you have the words of God and the words of people. And you do not know what to follow and what
Yeah,
not to
it's
follow. And they will manipulate the commands of God. So preservation is a necessity in whichever scripture that it is from God. So I was given multiple reasons, and one of them is preservation, which makes Islam or the Quran unique, essentially. I was not saying therefore Islam is true just because of the preservation. I gave multiple
but
reasons together.
And this is another thing. I mean, I'm not going to like sugarcoat. Is it okay if I'm completely upfront? I'm going to still be respectful, but
Yeah,
like,
go
I'm
ahead.
not,
Yeah, go ahead.
right. I'll
Yes.
tell you what I think. Honestly, is that
All right.
you guys
Yeah,
like
go ahead.
you have a plethora of reasons, and then you kind of, at least when you give dawah, you say that this is reason X, Y, and Z, and so it's true, and but then you'll say, oh, this isn't conclusive. We have other reasons. Like for example, you say it's simple and consistent, and no other religion satisfies these criteria, and therefore Islam is true. Like you said that in the other thing, but that doesn't give, like for
Well,
example,
I didn't word it that way, but go ahead.
all right,
Yeah, I'm just trying to
like,
understand what you're saying. Go ahead. Yeah.
is it, just because something is simple to easy to understand and
Okay.
like not complex and self-consistent too doesn't guarantee truth. It just means it has those properties which are necessary for truth. I don't think sufficient.
Sure.
Right?
First, the thing is you cannot take a part of the speech and then address it. If you want to address the speech, you have to address everything that was said together, right?
I can't
So,
repeat verbatim for what you said. Though.
yeah, but if you want to critique what I said, you need to know what I said.
I would just replay the video then at that point. I mean,
yeah, that's fine. You can just replay, because that's not the only time where someone asked me what is the truth. There's multiple other instances where people did that. And the thing is, if you want to critique what I say, you have to do that. So when you start, for example, say, you guys, I don't know who you're talking about, but I'm not responsible for what other people say. I'm responsible for what I say, and they are responsible for what they say. When I speak, the guy's question, I repeat exactly what he said, and then what I said to him. He said, why Islam? Then I said to him, because Islam is the truth. Is the only religion that has evidences that we can establish, therefore it is the truth. And on top of that, I was adding reasons that it is logically consistent, simple, that it is preserved, etc. And there's no internal contradictions or external contradictions. On top of the fact that we have evidences that we can demonstrate it is the truth. So this was
can I ask
what I said. So you left the first part, which is the most important part, which is the evidences, the objective evidences in which we can establish Islam is the truth. And then on top of that, the other things are necessities. It has to be rational and logically consistent. I'm saying other religions are not rational and logically consistent. So already you can discard it. It has to be preserved. I'm saying other religions are not. Therefore, the scriptures are not. Therefore, you have to discard them. They have internal and external contradictions. Therefore, you have to discard them. I don't even need to ask the question about whether they have objective evidences or not, because these necessary criteria are not there to begin with.
Okay, so that means that you're narrowing the religions down to Islam, and he already accepted that a religion is true. Sorry, I don't remember. I'm asking and he was accepting that he believes there is a religion that God has sent, and he was wondering which one.
Do you mean the person I was talking to?
Because yeah, just because
no,
the other ones.
The person I was talking to was just doing research. He said to me that I came across. I don't know why you're talking about him. I think we should talk about our conversation. We can get to your question now. He just came on the stream and he said he's researching different. He believes in God and he's researching different religions. And he asked me, why am I following Islam, or why should he choose Islam essentially? So I just gave him that as a response and said that he continued to do research. He's reading the Quran right now. He said, you're welcome to come back if you've got any other questions. That was basically the interaction. Nothing more and nothing less. Yes.
Do you claim that? Okay, so my claim is that there are systems of truth or belief that besides Islam that are complete, that have all the truth elements that are the same. So for example, it's logically consistent, simple, and actually more based on reason exclusively than Islam, yet you would reject those. So my question is, do you agree that or do you think that Islam it's sufficient, like reason is sufficient to arrive at Islam purely, or do you need a leap of faith, major, and is it major? Like, that's, what do you think?
So first, I disagree that there is another religion that is rationally consistent.
I didn't say religion, by the way.
What did you say? By the way, you're cutting off in the middle of your speech, so many of what you say is not really transmitted. By that, you're just letting you know. Sorry. You see the system. So what do you mean by a system then? Clarify.
Any ideology, basically, like for example, Aristotelian ethics, for example.
I don't believe they're all rationally consistent. There are disagreements between Aristotle and his student and his teacher. There are disagreements. Not everything within not everything within that ideology or the teachings that he said are accurate or correct. They're not rationally consistent. By the way, more importantly, we cannot even prove what he said because we have no historic. The level of historicity of what people attribute to Aristotle, Socrates, whatever is ridiculous. If you were to look at the level of oh, we just trust that they said these things. If you look at the manuscripts and look at we got nothing from their time or nothing that is authentically attributed to them historically. But I said, even if we accept that they said the things that you say they said, I think they're not, as you said, rationally consistent.
Even if they didn't, we're criticizing like the claims they make, which is a big difference with religion. You guys focus on so much about who's giving you the information because you rely so much on testimony, whereas we analyze the ideas in philosophy. That's the difference. Like,
I don't know.
It doesn't matter really.
I don't know who's we when you're talking about yourself, but generally, because you didn't tell me what you believe, but maybe
okay, not we. I.
No, I'm just trying to understand what you're saying. So the thing is, we don't do that as you're claiming we do as Muslims. No, we give rational evidences and we give reasons for why Islam is the truth. But as I said, the other things are a criteria for whatever scripture to be from God. On top of that criteria, you need to have objective evidences that something is the truth. I've got a lecture on my channel, for example, that I made about the reasons, evidences, compelling evidences why Islam is the truth, in which I go to some of these reasons. For example, the prophecies of the Prophet ﷺ that he's made in his time, after him, and today that are actualizing and happening. None of them are false. I talk about a natural world, how the Quran addresses or speaks about the natural world. Talk about how it talks about ancient history that was not known, nor in the previous scriptures, nor known to the people or civilizations. There's no claims from them with this information that today we discover that they are accurate. I talk about the inimitability challenge of the Quran itself. I talk about the Prophet himself and investigating his challenge. If you accept the idea of the existence of the divine, I go on and give multiple reasons and evidences why Islam is the truth.
Islamic question. Sorry.
Yes.
About hadith. Like.
Okay, so first we moved on from that question.
No. I don't want to go too deep in hadith. I just want to ask, like, do there exist like prophecies that were made in Islam but are regarded as like coming from da'if, or like sources that are da'if or mish sahih, like do those exist too? Or
what is authentic hadith? What is authentic hadith and what is a da'if hadith?
That's irrelevant. I'm asking, like,
that's relevant.
You know what they mean. So
no, but do you know what they mean?
Well, I'm asking you based on your understanding.
You didn't ask me the definition of these things. You asked me, are there a hadith or a da'if or whatever it is. I'm asking you a question now that should help answering the question that you're posing. Do you know the difference between a da'if and hadith, and how do we look at them?
Well, I'm not a Muslim. Why would I study the details? I'm asking you. Okay,
you could just say I don't know. It's simple. Like, I'm just asking a question. Do you know the definition of these? You can just say I don't know, and then I'll proceed to explain to you, and then the story is done. Or you can say I know, and you can say I know, and then I can go on and explain without reason of giving you the definition, so you don't get confused when I'm talking about that.
So there are prophecies that have came to be false, and by the way, you can't really falsify a prophecy, because if you say something's going to happen and it doesn't happen yet, you could say, oh, it's just going to happen in the future. Like, you can't really falsify. Either it's true or not true yet. For religious people, that's another issue.
That's incorrect, right? By the way, for many reasons. This is because many of the prophecies are people
unless you put a time frame.
Many of the prophecies are group specific, people specific. Many of the prophecies are time specific as well. So if this is the case, then you're able to falsify many prophecies that are made. This is the first thing. Second thing is you're being a bit defensive. Is the case. I asked you a question, you did not respond to it. Do you know the difference between a weak or an authentic narration?
Not enough for you, probably. No, I know some things, but like, you need a connected chain. You need the people to be trustworthy for sahih. There are 5, right? They have to have good memory. They have to have good character.
Okay, good. Yeah. So there is an objective criteria of which we determine authentic narration from a weak one. So it's not based on I feel today that this hadith is weak, and I feel tomorrow that this hadith is not weak. Now, this prophecies or ahadith have been graded by scholars that were contemporary to the people saying them. Before you do your research, because I see you doing your research, I hope you listen to what I say rather than to think what to say next. So there are people, thank you, there are people who are contemporary who graded the people, and these hadith have been graded already in the books. Now, the prophecies in this hadith have been graded weak or authentic, and we see them actualizing after the time. So, for example, we have many prophecies that are happening today. Allah, many, tens. And these prophecies that are happening today have been graded as authentic in the books over 1,000 years ago, and they were yet to happen. But today we see them actualizing and happening. So it is not like that we change and we take what we don't like and okay, we put what we like. There's an objective criteria. And based on that, we determine what is an authentic hadith and what is a weak hadith. And based on that, we can see whether these prophecies actualize or don't actualize. Now, if we authenticated the hadith, for example, Sahih al-Bukhari, which is a book that has been agreed upon with the Muslims from the time it has been written until today. If it has prophecies of the future that are explicit, clear about a specific event, and then today we see that they were incorrect, that didn't happen, then we'll have a problem as Muslims. But this is not the case.
But what's your name? Sorry, my friend.
My name is Muhammad.
Okay, Muhammad. I just so that like I understand what you're saying, and there have been prophecies that came true from Islam. I admit this, but and there aren't. It's like many, like you said. I don't know the exact number, but
okay.
I think the only criteria that you can falsify a prophecy is with time. If you set a specific time, with a place, it doesn't work because you could say, oh, it might happen in that place later on. For example, the analogy is if I give like in eternity for monkeys to typing, they're going to create Shakespeare and Einstein's gravity, right? So it's like I don't think it's with enough time these things will something will probably happen. Like if for billions of years of human history, it's not that.
Well, that's incorrect. That's incorrect. I mean, as I said, because when, for example, I said group specific, person specific. For instance, the Prophet ﷺ made claims about the Muslims. These claims can clearly be falsified if someone attacks the Muslims and annihilates them. At that time, they were a very small group of people. They were not millions of as we see them today. They're a very small group of people in Arabia. It could easily been erased as a civilization, just like previous civilizations have been erased. For instance, the Prophet ﷺ made prophecies about a specific individual by name, like Abu Lahab, like, for example, Suraq ibn Malik, etc. And these people died, and these prophecies could have been falsified. Whatever he said they will do or they will not do could have happened or not happened. He made prophecies about some of his companions, Abu Bakr Siddiq,
can we do one at a time because like the responses are going to be so different to them. Like,
yeah, I'm not the type of person who wants to go in a circle, and we are going in a circle.
No,
you welcome to ask
often,
actualize. Yeah, you need to. But this, I feel like we are going in a circle. So you asked a question first about the prophecies, the authentic hadith. I gave you an answer. Then you asked about again about the same thing, and then I'm giving you the answer right now. Then we can ask about the same thing. Do we keep going in a circle? I'm looking for more fruitful conversations. You asked.
Okay, fine. You asked. If you want to move
you
away
asked
from
about the prophecy. No, it's not that I want to move away. I want to get a fruitful conversation. I've already answered the questions that you posed. You said the prophecies are necessarily have to be time bound, and then I gave you responses that this is not necessarily the case. There are prophecies who are to do with people or to do with individuals that can also be falsified if that person dies and doesn't do the thing the prophet said he would do, or if that group or civilizations extend. And the prophets made multiple of prophecies like this. So what you're saying is not really accurate. But the thing is, you've admitted that there's multiple prophecies that have been correct in Islam. You admitted to that yourself. Now, are you able to present incorrect prophecies that have not actualized when the Prophet ﷺ gave a specific date or a specific time or etc., or a person specific or a group specific? Are you able to pause it?
But he doesn't give. He's not going to say in 1,005 years that this is going to happen. That doesn't exist. He doesn't give.
He gives the prophecy of the Romans and Persians is time bound. Is time but given specific amount of years.
Right.
Prophecy of Abu Lahab is time bound to his life. What will happen to him?
That one's not really that surprising. I mean, like he had deep conversations with his uncle.
Well, it's not about your subjective opinion. I'm just giving an example. The prophecies about some of his companions, like Abu Bakr and Umar, how they will die. One will die as a shaheed, one will die, etc. The prophecies about, for instance, Suraq ibn Malik and the Persian king. All of these prophecies that the Prophet ﷺ has made that are individual specific. Not only that, he made prophecies. For example, he said that the Roman and Persian king, they will be the last Roman Persian king in that region, and that's very specific and easily be falsified. If that Roman or Persian king dies and another one comes, and they're not defeated by Muslims or taken over, then easily falsified. Many of the prophecies are like this, but what we're trying to do is to try to, in a way, with all due respect, pretend as if this is not the case. No, there's tens of prophecies like this that can be falsified easily, but they've not been falsified. Now, if the case is that you don't have an example of a prophecy that has been falsified, and of all the prophecies that we have has been actualizing in the specific, we see them happening, and if you were just guessing, many of the prophecies will not happen. Many of the prophecies will not happen. You give me many of these prophecies that are just we keep telling the people, if the time passes, it will happen.
Like the minor signs that haven't passed yet, for example.
Not the minor signs.
Those
the minor signs. Most of them, if not all of them, have passed.
Oh, the major, and even
but
the
major signs. Major signs. We say they are the initiation of the day of judgment, which is the end of human history. So if they passed, you and me are not going to be talking right now, essentially. So if they start happening, you and me are not going to be chit-chatting anymore, because this is the beginning of.
But some of the minor signs, like for example, the beginning of the end. On Euphrates.
Okay, there was an article made that Euphrates is going to dry up by 2060. So the Euphrates is drying up. Now, what you're saying now is contradicting what you said before.
That's a natural thing, man.
No, wait. It's contradicting what you said before now. You're contradicting yourself, and I'll tell you how. Because that prophecy is falsifiable. Because the prophet said you will see gold and people will fight over it. So now in 260, when Euphrates dries up and we don't see gold and people don't fight over it, you've already falsified the prophecy. You see how?
No, you know what Muslims will do? They'll say, "Oh, it might gain water again, and then dry up again, and maybe then gold will emerge." Like,
okay. Now you're stretching. I've told you, if me and you are living and we see it drying up, but you see how you contradict you, right? Because you agree now that this prophecy is falsifiable, but now you're adding another element. You're saying, no, you added another element, but you said, Muslims are going to come and try to pretend as if it is not. So bring me an example like this. Where are these prophecies that have not happened, that are specific like this, that we've pretended that they're going to happen later on? Where?
Any of them that haven't happened, like the minor or major signs that haven't happened. And then
they have not happened.
Just predicting.
I said, give me an example of something of specific that didn't happen, and then we said, but X is going to happen again, or it's going to happen. Where do we do that? Just like they.
No, you don't say it's going to happen again. You say it will happen exactly as it's foretold. That. But later in the future, we don't know.
So right now, you're just doing hypotheticals.
Allahu Alam, right?
So you've got no proof. You just be doing hypotheticals and going in circles.
No.
Again, okay. Let's as I said, let's move on from going in the same circle. Do you have any other questions that are actually reasonable with evidences, not hypothetical situations? That in 260, hypothetically, Muslims are going to come and say the river is going to fill up again. Okay. Do you have actual evidences? Things which are reasonable, not keep going in the same.
Yes, I do. I have some science. My claim is it's obvious too. It should just be like common knowledge. Science is truth, veracity. Science is truth, veracity. Its level of veracity is way higher than Islam and every other religion by nature of the knowledge. And I don't know why this is insufficient for religious people, because I don't get this part. Why do you need to posit some? And there's another issue related to this, which is science doesn't assume about the world without reasonable hypothesis based on mathematics or the past discoveries. But religion holds premises, just beliefs, and then goes to justify them afterwards by looking like this natural phenomenon happened, and how does it fit with our belief? This happened, and science does that, but I think it's very different, and I don't know. What do you think?
I've not seen a question. You're just talking about science, right? So all of you said is science is this. It does not make hypotheses unless there's evidence. You're saying multitude of different things, right? But what is the question that you're asking me?
My question is why? What this isn't an Islam specific issue. This is a religious specific issue, which I have, and Islam is at the forefront of this because they try to mix in with science. They're like, oh yeah, Islam predicted this. And we have God split the universe, and then these are real stretches. You want to talk about stretches, man? And they do this, and it's kind of
where is the stretch in the fact that the universe is expanding and the Quran says the universe is expanding? Where's the stretch?
But it doesn't. It doesn't say that.
I'm using your example. Where is the stretch?
It's an interpretation.
No, it literally says. Science. It literally says expanding. What do you mean interpretation? The universe is expanding in actuality, and the Quran says it's expanding. Where is interpretation there?
Because it doesn't just say it's expanding. It says it expanded from very dense. I'm talking about science.
Oh, so you wanted to give you history too?
No, science gives very specific and detailed descriptions of reality, whereas religion has vague general statements like that. Oh yeah,
who told you the Quran is scientific?
It says we split the universe. It doesn't say expand, by the way.
No, it doesn't. You're talking about the wrong verse. You're talking about chapter 21, verse 30. You're talking about the wrong verse. I'm talking about a completely different verse. The thing is, what you're doing right now is, with all due respect, is you're saying, oh yeah, it doesn't talk about the history of cosmology, of how it came to the point of expanding, disregarding the fact that it's giving you the conclusion that the people were not saying, that the Quran is saying that it's fact. Now you're expecting the Quran to be a scientific cosmological book instead of a religious guide book, which is
No, dude, this is another thing. You guys,
can you allow me to finish?
As I said,
I allow you to finish. I allow you to finish. You allow me to finish. No need for us to interrupt you or interrupt each other. I didn't interrupt you. I'm sure you'd agree. I didn't interrupt you. I'll let you finish. So the Quran is not a cosmological scientific book in which it will give you the history of the beginning of the universe until the point in which the universe is expanding, and start talking to you about redshifting. And the fact is that the wavelength of the galaxies is stretching, and then therefore you see the fabric of space itself stretching, and the equations to do with that is the Quran is not going to do that. And if it did that, actually, it will be a never-ending, infinite book that no one is going to read.
No, it wouldn't.
And there would be no point of it being a book of guidance. The Quran is very small, and most people do not read regularly. So let alone if it was bigger than this. Anyways, the thing is,
that's such a if it really had that this detailed description, like it introduced relativity and then explained even just that phenomenon, it would be a much higher evidence for its truth.
So the Quran is going to come speaking to the people of the time there is no existence of general relativity. There's no mathematical.
But it told them other things they didn't know.
There's no mathematical. You're not allowing me to finish. There's no again. I don't know why you need to interrupt. I don't need to interrupt you. Right? If you're feeling that I'm refuting you, don't panic. There's no need to panic. I'm not refuting you, and you're making your points. I'll let you finish them, and then I respond to them. So there was no general relativity at the time. There was no equations in the way we're using equations today. And the Quran is going to come down to Bedouin Arabs. It's going to come down to people of that time with their level of knowledge, and it's going to talk to them about Einstein of physics and cosmology, and give them general relativity, which is a term they don't understand, and give them equations of space and the cosmos and the things they have no clue about, which is the exact opposite of wisdom. Now, the thing is, this is how people, and I'll let you go after this. This is how people,
of course,
who don't want to believe in Islam, of course, because I don't see sincerity. I see we're going in a circle. This is who people who don't believe
convert to Islam is insincere.
I never told you to convert in this conversation. I just said that you're not being reasonable in the discussion. So
I am.
This is the level of with all due respect, going around in circles of the people who want to kind of present something against Islam need to do. And we'll let the people judge anyways. People heard you speak and heard me speak. I'm not insecure about how people. I'm not insecure about how people are going to judge the discussion. I can clearly see, and I don't need to interrupt you while you're speaking. So this is the thing. We don't need to interrupt each other. I'm speaking. You need to speak. This is my channel, by the way. So I'm being generous enough to let you speak and let you interrupt me more than once. But if it keeps happening, what's the point of then having a discussion, right? I'm being very reasonable with you here. Not screaming, not shouting. That's why I said in the beginning of the discussion, because I already knew how the discussion is going to go, is that you covered your face, and I told you that we start in the beginning. I already predicted the discussion. I told you that we need to not interrupt each other, be respectful to one another, because I already knew how the discussion is going to go. So anyways, it was something for people to see, is the level of people that people have to go through if they want to kind of present a case against Islam, the level of unreasonable claims, the level of going around beating around the bush that people need to do.